What's up guys, welcome to the Chess Giant. This is Solomon Ordell, and in today's video we're going to be covering what many consider to be the #1 option for black against e4 when it comes to winning chances, and that is with this move of c5 with the Sicilian Defense. And honestly, I have to agree. I do think that the Sicilian Defense gives black great winning chances against e4, but that being said, I do have a couple of warnings for y'all. First off, yes, it gives us great chances for the win, aggressive chess, complex opening type positions, but at the same time, we can also lose a lot of games with the Sicilian if we're not careful, right? This is not like the Go Piano. This is not like the Vienna game, in which case both sides have a lot of different moves that they can play, a lot of flexibility. A lot of these lines are extremely sharp, and if you don't know the right move, or if you don't find the right move, you can simply lose the game on the spot. On top of that, the Sicilian Defense, in my opinion, is the most complex opening in all of chess, okay? And really the reason it took me so long to make this video is not because I don't like the Sicilian. In fact, I've been playing it for over a decade. The reason is that I simply cannot cover everything, right? In most of my videos, you know, the Owen's Defense, Pirc Defense, Alekhine, etc., I love to show, you know, all the big lines, variations, ideas, really go into the theory. Obviously, I can't show everything and really any opening, but I can show a lot. Guys, the Sicilian is a totally different story, right? I mean, if I tried to show you guys every single line variation, idea, you know, all the Grandmaster prep that goes into the system, this video would be hundreds of hours long, and I'm not joking. I mean, I myself played the Sicilian Najdorf, and just that could probably take me about 40 hours to explain. So really today's video is an introductory video sharing the key concepts and ideas, and then on top of that showing you all of the different systems that you have at your disposal when playing the Sicilian, many of which I'm going to be making videos on in the future. But today's video is really an introductory video, really trying to show you all the different options that you have and explaining what the difference is between the Taimanov, the Sicilian Najdorf, the Sicilian Dragon, right? All these different things and how they play a part with different roles and different ideas and plans of attack. So first off, let's answer the question, okay, when we play this move of c5 at move 1, what are we trying to do, right? I mean, really, this doesn't get our back rank pieces activated a ton at the start. It does get our queen active on d8 as we're attacking key squares like c7, b6, and a5, which is going to play a huge part later on in these opening variations, as you're going to see. But really, this is the only back rank piece that is affected, right? I mean, this bishop isn't more active. The bishop on c8 isn't more active. Guys, the main idea of c5, however, is not to get the back rank pieces involved at move 1, but instead trade a flank pawn for a center pawn. Right, so the main line here for white is to play knight f3 and then break through in the center of the board. Notice what we're doing. We're trading a flank pawn for one of white's 2 center pawns. So here we have the option of taking on d4, and as y'all can notice, we have 2 central pawns and white only has 1. Now in return, white currently does have a little bit of a space advantage. They're attacking key squares like d5 and f5. This knight is centralized, but oftentimes if the Sicilian defense player can trade into an endgame, black will actually be better. Notice here, both sides have 2 pawn islands, right? Black has a pawn island of 5 and a pawn island of 2. White, on the other hand, has a 4 and a 3. Many Grandmaster players, including GM Yasser Seirawan, actually prefers to have the 5 and 2 opposed to the 4 and 3, and I myself would have to agree. Right now, look, I'm not sitting here and saying, oh my gosh, you have 5 versus 2 and a 4 versus 3. The 5-2 is completely winning. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that having 5 pawns all connected like this gives us a very solid game going forward. And if we can keep these pawns intact without giving up material, of course, we're going to have ourselves a very nice endgame position. On top of that, much of the time in the Sicilian Defense, as you're going to see, we can reach a race, right? So oftentimes white will castle queenside, black will castle kingside. White is going to have to throw all these pawns down the board if they want to try to checkmate our king. Black, on the other hand, we're only going to be throwing down 2, right? a6, b5, b4, etc., etc. These pawns on the queen side for black, this b7 and a7 pawns, are really the pawns that we're going to launch towards the opponent's king. White, on the other hand, is going to have to launch 3 or 4. So if we can trade down into an endgame, oftentimes we will be better. On top of that, in a position like this, we also have the c file available, right? White's going to have the d file, and we're going to have the c file. So oftentimes we're going to develop our pieces as quickly as we can, put our rook on c8, and continue to play aggressive and attacking chess. Now guys, in this position, we played the move of d6, right? We played d6, white broke through with d4, and then we captured off. And here we have a few different ideas. Usually black will start off by playing knight f6, But now against knight c3, we have options like g6 with the Sicilian Dragon looking to fianchetto this dark squared bishop, making it a monster as we try to expand on the queen side of the board. We could also play the Scheveningen variation with e6. We can go with this option of knight c6 going into the classical variation, and finally the Najdorf with a6. Now this is what I've been playing nearly my whole life. I got it from Grandmaster Garry Kasparov as a kid. He was my favorite player, and this was his pet system, looking to support this b5 push. Now look, even when you play the Najdorf, there's so many different things that you have to prepare for, right? Here white can play the English attack with bishop e3. Much of the time black will respond by playing knight g4, trying to trade it off. We could also see a move here such as h3 with the Adams attack, bishop e2, the Sozin attack with bishop c4. There's so many different things that we have to be ready for. But really the main line here, according to many players, is this move of bishop g5. And this is probably the move that I see the most when playing the Sicilian Najdorf. Now again, guys, this video is just introductory. I'm not trying to show you every single line of variation and idea, but just to show you how complicated the Sicilian can be, let me show you the main line of the Najdorf. We're starting off with e6. Oftentimes white will respond with f4. And we're now going to play bishop e7. By the way, queen b6 is also an idea here. Very crazy system. The poison pawn variation, willing to get this king attacked like crazy to pick off the pawn on b2. However, most players here play it more safe with this move of bishop e7, followed by queen c7. If a move like castling queenside, we play knight bd7 and continue with a queenside expansion of b5. This is usually the type of setup that you're going to see if you play the Najdorf, right? You're tucking your bishop and your queen away on e7 and c7. Your knights are on f6 and d7. You're expanding on the queen side. You're looking at bishop b7, putting some pressure in the center. And then from this point, depending on the position, you will castle kingside and really put both of your rooks on this queenside position, or even castle queenside in a lot of cases. However, the main line here for white is to actually take this knight on f6 and then continue with g5, making us go back to d7. White will oftentimes then continue with this move of f5, putting a ton of pressure on e6. And by the way, there's actually two different moves here from black. One of them is bishop takes g5 with check, going up a pawn, but getting a very loose position, right? Bishop takes g5, king b1. From that point, guys, white has a very open game and great attacking chances. So sometimes black will take the pawn on g5, but if you do this, you really need to prep your theory. But really, if you play the Sicilian at all, you got to prep your theory. Another option here for black, which I've played nearly my whole life, is this move of knight c5, allowing white to play f6, in which case I drop my bishop back to f8. And look, I mean, we're looking at ideas here like b4 potentially. We want to develop our pieces, right? We want to play a move here like bishop b7 and get our king castled queenside, but oftentimes this isn't quite how it happens. White will play a move like rook g1, looking to play queen h5, putting some pressure on f7, and also this pawn on e6 by doing so. But here we're going to play the move of h5 ourselves, preventing the queen from coming into the spot. And okay, white will oftentimes now play this move of rook g7. By the way, guys, we are still in opening theory. This isn't me just plugging this into the computer. This has been played. This move of rook g7 has been played 18 times at the master and grandmaster level. And against this, black will then continue with b4, right? Trying to kick this knight around. However, this knight usually doesn't go back, but actually goes right into d5, right? Knight d5 attacking the queen. We really just have to take this knight off. And here we go. A position like this, we're up a piece for a pawn, but this position is very hard to navigate for black and also for white, right? I mean, white's almost down a piece. Black here, this king, very vulnerable to attack. This position has been getting reached for decades, and there is still debate on who is better. So yeah, that was a very quick intro to the Sicilian Najdorf and some of the ideas and really the main line that you can see in that opening. Really, I'm trying to show you that some of these lines, guys, you're going to have to memorize up to move 19 or 20, sometimes even more. But what other options does black have here besides the Najdorf or any d6 systems? Well, again, notice, guys, in the Najdorf, we started off with d6, but black here doesn't have to play a move like d6. There's other options here, including e6, knight c6, and g6 as well. Right, so let's take a look first at this move of knight c6 with the old Sicilian variation. And here's black. We're prepared to take on d4. And now we can play moves such as knight f6. We can continue with here with the Hyper Accelerated Dragon of g6, right? Trying to fianchetto that bishop. We can also go into the Taimanov with this move of e6, right? This is a lot different than d6 because by playing e6, we're not really fighting for the dark squares, but we're actually contesting the squares that this pawn on e4 is attacking, right? We're fighting for d5. We're fighting for f5. Here, if we see a move from white, such as knight c3, oftentimes black will play this move of queen c7. White can try to kick her queen around, but okay. I mean, we'll just drop it back and continue with a move like a6. And here, if a move like bishop e3 from white, we can continue with a6. Notice how safe this queen is at the moment. There's not really a ton that white can do to attack that queen. We're also eyeing the square of f4. And here, if a move like queen d2, we're going to continue with knight f6, a move like bishop b4, pinning the knight on c3 to the queen. And if a move like f3, we have knight e5. I mean, y'all, this is classic Taimanov Sicilian chess. We're really trying to put a ton of pressure on that knight on c3. We have potential knight c4 ideas if this bishop doesn't attack the knight in a lot of cases. And we're also looking at b5 as well as bishop b7 and getting this rook involved. We as well could castle kingside and get the rook on h8 involved into the attack and into the pressure against that king on c1. So guys, we covered a couple different moves so far, including d6 and knight c6 and the various Sicilian systems that can come out of that. We can also play this move e6, right? Going into the French variation, immediately fighting for squares such as f5 and d5. And here, if a move like d4, okay, we're ready to have this thing broken open. Again, we have two central pawns. White has one. We could go into the Taimanov with knight c6 yet again, transposing into the position that we just reached. We can also here play a move like knight f6, right? Just putting some pressure on e4, bishop c5. There's a ton of different options here. We can also play the Sicilian Kan, right? With this move of a6, right? The Kan variation, all of a sudden we're looking at potential d5 and b5 breaks. By the way, guys, in a ton of Sicilian openings, if you can get this d5 move in at the right time, you're gonna be in business. Let's say white here plays a move like knight c3. Okay, we play queen c7. Notice how nice our queen is tucked away here, right? It seems as if it's in the open, but there's not really a ton that white can do to attack that queen at the moment because it's so well fortified by our pawn structure. Here, if a move like bishop d3, we can play knight f6. If a move like castling kingside, we're going to continue with natural ideas like d6, knight d7, bishop e7, castle kingside, and always just try to reroute our knight and activate our pieces as much as possible. Here with the move like knight c5, a nice maneuver here from black, putting some pressure on d3 and e4, b5 and b4 ideas in the air. And we're playing hyperdynamic chess for the win. So those are a few different things that we can try to do against the move of knight f3. There's so many systems, right? The Scheveningen, the Kan, Sicilian, the Dragon, all these kind of things. In fact, when it comes to the Dragon, we've covered the Sicilian Dragon. We've covered the Accelerated Dragon. Now we're going to be covering the Hyper Accelerated Dragon, and that is by playing g6 right away, right? Sometimes if you're a Dragon player, you like to really take your time, play a move like d6, take on d4, knight f6, and then fianchetto that bishop. Sometimes you like to do it a little bit quicker, right? Play a move like knight c6, take on d4, and then g6. Some players like playing g6 right away. The whole idea being, if white here breaks to a d4, we're simply going to capture back. This move of queen takes d4 can seem very intimidating, but if you really study the theory, knight f6 and knight c6, black is going to be completely fine. And here, if the move of knight takes on d4, we have knight c6, bishop g7. Notice how much of a monster this bishop is, putting a ton of pressure on that centralized knight. If a move like bishop e3, we have knight f6. We're going to continue now by castling kingside pretty quickly, and then continuing with d6, bishop d7, and rook c8. Remember, guys, this c8 square is a key square for one of our rooks. And here, if white decides to castle queenside, we just found ourselves in a race. And this is something that happens all the time in the Sicilian. Sometimes your opponent will castle kingside, right? Sometimes they'll castle kingside and the game will be a little bit more calm, although even then, a ton on the table. But y'all, if this king castles queenside, there is nothing short of a full-on race happening here, right? Black is going to be throwing everything towards the white king on the queen side of the board, and white, on the other hand, is going to focus all their energy and efforts towards the king side of the board and trying to checkmate our king before we checkmate theirs. Here, black can continue with an active move like knight e5, right? Eyeing key squares, including the square of c4. At any moment, we can play knight c4 and attack that queen. We're also activating our rook on c8 a little bit more, really pouncing down on that knight. If a move like h4, a lot of GM players like playing this move h5, trying to slow down this h-pawn. And here, if a move like bishop g5 from white, most of the time, black would play a move like a6, trying to play b5. But guys, in this exact position, in this exact setup in the Hyper Accelerated Dragon, oftentimes black will play this move of rook c5. In fact, this has been played 651 times at the master and grandmaster level in over-the-board tournament games. Whole idea being that this bishop is no longer eyeing our rook on c5, right? So instead of, playing a move like a6 and b5, and then kind of having a pawn on a6 that is kind of slaved to defending that pawn on b5, because if we push it, we just lose our pawn on b5, we're instead going to use our rook, right? Play this move, rook c5, and then play this move of b5, expanding on the queen side of the board. White oftentimes, if they know their theory, which if you've reached this position, they probably do, they'll play a move like g4, in which case black has a couple of different options here. A lot of master and grandmaster level players like to take on g4, and there's also a lot that like to continue with this move of a5, just continuing to throw pawns down the board. Guys, talk about an intense position. White here with a ton of active pieces, really trying to put some pressure on black, and black on the other hand also with some active pieces. I mean, even this bishop going all the way back to g7, for this bishop to be active, these knights simply have to get out of the way. An active rook on c5, pawns on b5 and a5, this bishop's solid. All of our pieces are in the action. It's really just a race on who can checkmate the other king first, and this is what you call classic Sicilian type chess. So y'all, that really briefly summarizes all of the key systems for black against knight f3, followed by d4, breaking the game open. However, I also want to mention that if you do play the Sicilian, oftentimes white will not play this move of knight f3, trying to break open the center, right? I mean, look, what if you're an e4 player and you don't want to study a ton against the move of c5, right? I mean, that makes a ton of sense. A lot of e4 players, if they do face c5 and they want to go into knight f3 and d4, they don't have to just study one of these. They don't just have to study the Najdorf or the Kan or the Dragon. They have to study all of these systems and more if they really want to be prepared. So oftentimes white will go into one of the sideline variations. These include c3 with the Alapin Opening, looking to support this move d4. You could also see this move d4 right away, right? Going into the Smith-Morra Gambit, we have the Wing Gambit with b4, the delayed Wing Gambit with a3, and we also have the Snyder Variation with b3. White here can also play this move of knight c3, looking to go into a grand Prix Attack by playing f4. White here could also just play a move like knight c3, followed by g3, looking to fianchetto this bishop. There's so many different things that white can do here. I'm just warning y'all, there's a ton of sidelines, a bunch of ways that white can avoid the mainline theory. And as a Sicilian player, you're going to have to be ready for each of these. For you Sicilian players, which one of these would you want me to cover first? Are you really trying to find a response against the Grand Prix? Are you trying to find a response against the Smith-Morra or the Danish or the delayed Wing Gambit, Snyder? The list goes on and on. Let me know down in the comment section below, and the opening, in which case most of you Sicilian players are trying to find a response against. I'll make sure to cover that one first. Thank you guys for watching today's video, and special thanks to everyone who has become a patron. My goal is to make this chess thing go full time, and y'all are helping me create better chess content and drop it more often. If you'd like to check out my entire openings playlist, click that playlist to the left. If you'd like to see my top 10 chess openings for black against d4, click that video to the right. Leave a comment down below to let me know what other videos you'd like to see covered on this channel, and as always, I appreciate you guys. Thanks for watching. Peace.